Teddy Bridgewater joins the Buccaneers. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. Lots of people asking about the Micah Parsons situation, and we have some updates on a couple of injuries, some talk about preseason. All of that is coming up in a little bit. But the big news of the day is that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have signed quarterback Teddy Bridgewater to a one-year deal. Now, Baker Mayfield returned to practice on Tuesday, but before that, the Bucs only had about half of their quarterbacks available over the last couple of practices because of injury. Now, they add a seasoned veteran with a ton of experience into the room to help back up Baker Mayfield. Todd Bowles was asked about the signing and said, quote, "He brings us a wealth of experience at that spot. Obviously, we don't have it. Kyle has been here a few years, but he hasn't really played. Obviously, we have the new guy just coming in." He's referring to Connor Bazelak, the undrafted rookie. But so we need the extra arm. We think we need some experience in that room. The more experience, the better. I believe he can help if he's here. He's definitely a guy that can do that. He's been in some of the same systems as Baker has been in. He has a wealth of knowledge from a coaching standpoint as well as a playing standpoint. He can't do anything but help, end quote. Jason Light was also asked about it, saying, quote, "We've talked about this actually over a couple of weeks, maybe even over the summer. We had some discussions about it, that it would be a nice addition for the room. Good for Baker. He's an experienced guy, obviously very smart, hell of a high school coach, hell of a coach in general, but just a good addition to have that wealth of experience there. We still have preseason games to play and all that, but right now Kyle is our backup. That's the intention, and that's what we're hoping for. But yeah, everybody's competing," end quote. All right, here's where I think it gets interesting, because at this stage, I don't care who they say the backup is. I think they don't make this signing unless they feel they need to upgrade the backup quarterback. That's no disrespect to Trask, but I've said it for a few years that I didn't think he was going to be anything more than a career backup anyway, after I had more than a couple of opportunities to watch him up close. And I think Baker missing some practices and Trask being on, a one-year deal basically made him vulnerable when they watched him out there with the first team offense. I think that's kind of what sped this along a little bit. Yeah, you can have discussions about all kinds of guys. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But they made this move, and they made it for a reason. Here's the way I look at it. God forbid Baker goes down and misses a game or two. Let's say he gets banged up. It's his ankle or his shoulder or something. Nothing serious, but it's bad enough that he's going to miss 2 games. And let's put a little bit more on the line. Let's say it's 2 games in late November, early December. Crunch time, where every game can mean the difference between making or missing the playoffs. Which quarterback are you going to trust to go out there and get a couple of wins against teams like the Cardinals and Saints? Kyle Trask, who's entering his 5th season and has thrown 11 career passes? Or Teddy Bridgewater, who was in Miami with Grizzard, has started over 60 games as well as a playoff game, has completed over 66% of his career passes, has 75 career touchdowns and only 47 career interceptions. He's been a starter. He's backed up Breeze. He's backed up Goff. That's not a guy that's going to take a backseat to Kyle Trask. I'm sorry, but he's not. They don't sign this level of player just because they needed an extra arm at camp. I think ultimately the coaches and Jason Light didn't like what they saw over the last couple of days with Trask at the helm, and they thought, you know what, we have a real shot at winning it all. And if Baker goes down for any length of time, our season goes with him. So they looked to upgrade. They revisited those conversations that they had, and they said, we need to pull the trigger on this. Now, if Baker goes down for extended time, and I'm talking a major injury that takes him out for half of the year or more, then the Bucs are cooked anyway. But let's not forget that, this was a situation that Bridgewater was in back in 2019. He had to step in for Drew Brees, and he went 5-0 with 9 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. He completed almost 70% of his passes on his way to being one of the top finalists for the comeback player of the year. If you just wanted an extra arm or someone to get through, the next couple of weeks while these guys deal with injuries, you go get Jeff Driscoll or Jake Fromm or CJ Beathard, or you get an undrafted free agent. You don't pluck a guy away from being a head football coach at a high school that was just in the league last year with the Lions as their number 2. You don't bring that guy in who played for your offensive coordinator a few years ago, who played for your defensive line coach when he was the head coach at Louisville. This was a signing that was made because Teddy is a player, I think, that this coaching staff feels that if they need someone to go out at the quarterback position and win 1 or 2 games this season, they have more faith in him to do it than they do Kyle Trask. And I hate to pile on and try to make it seem like I don't like Trask. I do. He's a great dude. But I have very little confidence that he can step into a regular season game and steal a win with his experience. There is nothing that Teddy B hasn't seen or hasn't been through in this league. There's nothing that's going to surprise him at this stage of his career. He can go on the road against the Rams and steal you that game. Is anyone going to have that kind of faith in Kyle Trask? No. And it's not his fault that he doesn't have experience. He backed up Tom Brady, and then he backed up Baker Mayfield. He was never going to win that competition a few years ago, and we all made fun of the idea that it was a competition, when they announced it, because it wasn't. We knew from day one Baker Mayfield was going to be the starting quarterback. There wasn't really a market for Trask in free agency. The Bucs wanted him back because of his familiarity, so they agreed to a 1-year deal. But it's 1 year with $1.3 million guaranteed and a max value of $2.7 million. That doesn't exactly scream untouchable. Now, there's no word as of yet what Bridgewater's deal is outside of just 1 year, but I think that's also going to be really telling. If he's getting more guaranteed money than Trask, then you know who the number 2 quarterback on this roster is going to be come week 1. It'll all work itself out throughout the rest of camp and in the preseason. I don't think we're going to see Teddy this weekend against the Titans, but we might, depending on how quickly he takes to the offense. But this was done in order to have a better, more experienced backup for Baker, someone that has proven that they can win games in this league. This was a move, like Jason said, that they've talked about for weeks. That's long before these injuries happened. That's long before they actually needed another arm. This was them preparing themselves to bring in a player that's going to help the team as a whole. It's a move that's going to help Baker Mayfield in that quarterback room, in those film studies, on that sideline. And he's going to be able to step up if called upon. Some injury updates and preseason talk. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of the year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and Locked On Bucs are going to be playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Bets. Betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily MLB locks and can't miss football futures. Find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So some injuries, we have updates on. And the Bucs do have a preseason game this weekend, which, yes, there will be a reaction episode dropping about that after the game is over. But let's start with the injury stuff, and there's no better place to start than with Chris Godwin. Jason Light was asked about his status and said, quote, "That we don't know yet. He's doing very well. He's advancing through his protocols. He's exactly where they anticipated and hoped he would be at this point. We've still got a ways to go," end quote. Now, there are some reports out there saying that the Bucs are preparing for Godwin to not start the season, but that's nothing new. There was always an outside chance that this was going to happen, especially after we learned that they had to go back in for some cleanup. He has not started practicing yet, and the longer that goes on, the less likely it will be that he suits up for the first game of the season against Atlanta. But again, not the end of the world. Same with Tristan. Not the end of the world. They need those guys for the long haul, not just week one. You need them in November, in December, in January, in 2026, in 2027. So if they're out, they're out. It's the next man up. The next man up behind Godwin, I think there's a lot more confidence about him at this stage than the next man up for Wirfs. And that's because Ibuka was a first-round pick. He is making tons of buzz around the NFL world, tons of buzz on Bucs social media. For those that haven't seen the most recent In the Current, that breaks down the selections of Ibuka and Morrison, shows a lot of the behind-the-scenes interviews, all that stuff. He was going to be an immediate impact player no matter what. Now, Charlie Heck has bounced around a little bit. He's only started 23 games in his career. So going from the best tackle in football to a player with less than 1.5 seasons of starting experience over the course of 5 years, that's going to cause some nervousness. So Light was asked about Wirfs, and he said, quote, "Yeah, he's doing an excellent job. We just have to be careful and not push him out there too early. I'm sure we'll put him through a battery of tests before we deem him fit to play. I'm sure his doctors will. We just want to be careful with that one. He's a cornerstone player for us, and we don't want to put him out there before it's too soon, but he's doing an excellent job," end quote. As for other injuries, I mentioned that Baker returned to practice on Tuesday. So did Levante David. So did Sua Opeta. That was really nice. This was Opeta's first practice since his ACL tear last season during training camp. Levante missed most of last week, but there are still plenty of players out. Cade Otton, Tez Johnson, Cam Johnson, Trey Palmer. Those receivers are all in a battle for roster spots, so missing time is less than ideal for those guys, more so Cam Johnson and Trey Palmer, in my opinion, but it is still going to affect the competition when they can't be out there on the field going up against these other receivers that are also battling for roster spots. But that brings us to the preseason game this weekend against the Tennessee Titans. Now, they do have a joint practice on Thursday, but Bowles was asked about any starters playing in the game this weekend, and he said, quote, "Depending on how practice goes on Thursday, a lot of starters are going to get a lot of reps in that practice. I expect to see a lot of young guys on Saturday," end quote. Translation, pretty much no starters are playing in this game. There may be a couple sprinkled in here and there, But, the starting O-line minus probably Charlie Heck, he would be a starter that it wouldn't surprise me to see him out there getting a couple of reps on the first drive or two. But the rest of the O-line, they're going to be sitting. Baker, Mike, Bucky, Rashad, McMillan, and honestly, probably Emeka Ibuka. They're all going to be in street clothes. They're not going to play in this game. I know Bull said a lot of young guys. He expects to see a lot of young guys on Saturday, but Ibuka is a starter. Entering this season, the Bucs probably are not going to throw him out there in this game. He will get preseason reps, but it won't be this weekend. Defensively, Vita Vea, Kalijah Cansey, Hall, Levante, Servassier, Antoine, McCollum, Dean, they're probably all sitting. You're probably going to see Benjamin Morrison, Jacob Parrish, Elijah Roberts out there quite a bit to start the game, but you're not going to see much of the regular starters. Of course, that's the starters as they are listed on the depth chart that was released for this game, and that depth chart is exactly what you would expect to see. So I know what you're all saying. You're saying, well, then why would I watch? It's preseason. No one is playing. Why would I waste my time watching vanilla football without any stars? Well, to that, I would reply with my annual reminder of how to watch preseason games. Here's the thing. You longtime everydayers know what I'm about to tell you, but there's lots of new eyes and ears on the show. This is for the newbies. This is for those of you that may have forgotten. Preseason football can be fine if you know what you're watching for. Do not watch this like a regular football game. If you do, you're going to go insane. The first thing that you're watching is the players that are in position battles and whether or not they are winning their one-on-one battles. The bubble receivers like Palmer, Jerry, Cam, Tez, Ryan Miller, those guys, are they winning their one-on-one matchup? Same with the other side. Morrison, Parrish, Izzian, Roberts, Braswell, Ramirez, Watts, are they winning their individual battles? That's what the takeaways are going to be. Do not worry about the score. Nobody cares if the Bucs win or lose this game. It's about what they saw out there on the field. And that brings me to my next point, and that is the score is irrelevant. There's a reason for that. A big part of these preseason games are creating situations and trying to win that situation. It may be a first down situation. It may be a third and long situation. It may be a third and short situation. The Bucs may go for it on a fourth down from midfield because it's too long for a field goal but too short for a punt, and they want to try something out. They may go for it on fourth and goal from the 1 yard line, but they want to do that running a particular pass play just to see if they can get it to work. The approach to this isn't the same as the approach to a regular season game. There will be personnel decisions that are made based strictly on situations that they're facing so that they can test out certain bubble players in a game setting. That doesn't mean that if the Titans win and they beat the Bucs 45-10, that the Bucs are doomed and they're going to go 4-13 or something stupid like that. What it means is that the Bucs tried certain things and maybe they didn't work. But why didn't they? That's when you go back on Sunday, in this case, you sit down and you review the film with the position coaches, with the coordinators. Then starting on Monday, you start going over it with the players. Was it a concept that didn't work? Was it a player that messed up? Was this play run, the exact way that we want to run it on our side, but then a player on the defense just made a great play? It has nothing to do with the final outcome and everything to do with the game within the game. And then finally, you can start to get a sense as to which players are getting opportunities and really taking advantage and making the most of them. Is there a bubble receiver that emerges as a go-to guy late in the game and he can start to work his way up the ladder? Is there an offensive lineman that looks to be ahead of schedule? Is there an undrafted rookie or two that may not have stood out so far in practice, may not have gotten a lot of buzz, but all of a sudden they elevate their game under the lights and now we start paying a little bit more attention to them? It's similar to watching whether or not guys are winning their matchups, but it's also going to set the tone for the next week of training camp leading up to the next preseason game. Like, is Shiloh Sanders all of a sudden going to take the field ahead of Kayvon Merriweather? Or is Jake Majors going to leapfrog Elijah Klein with the second team offensive line? Those are the little things that are the domino effect that come out of the first preseason game. Now, all of a sudden, threes move up to twos, some twos starting to make a push and get rotated in with the ones. That's what you're watching for. That's what I'm going to be watching. That's what I'm going to be reacting to after the game. So do not watch it like you would watch a game on a Sunday in October. Watch it like it's an audition for some of these players and some of these coaches and see what adjustments get made going into next week. You guys asked about it. I'm going to answer it. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, and it gives you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It is a complete financial command center where you can track all of your accounts, all of your investments, all of your spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also starting to build wealth. You don't have to juggle multiple apps all over the place anymore, because chances are if you're juggling that many apps, you're going to forget one. Use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, plan your long-term goals, and use it for everything. It's a one-stop shop. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Wrapping things up here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, and I knew the question was coming as soon as the announcement was made that Micah Parsons wanted out of Dallas. And it came from dozens of you in various forms on various platforms. Do you think the Bucs are going to go after Parsons? What would it take to get Parsons? Do you think the Bucs are interested in Parsons? We need Micah Parsons right now by any means necessary. I wasn't going to talk about it, but I will, since so many of you texted, DM'd, Facebook messaged, Instagram DM'd, TikTok, all that. Here's my stance. Yes, of course, I think the Bucs are interested in Parsons. Every team in the NFL is interested in Parsons. If they're not, then they don't care about winning. However, I do not think that Tampa is going to trade for him, and ultimately, I don't think he gets traded at all, at least not before the season starts. Parsons is going to get a mega extension or a mega deal, whatever you want to call it, whether he gets traded and then gets an extension, if he hits free agency and gets signed by someone, it's going to be massive. TJ Watt just got $41 million a year. Myles Garrett got 40. Danielle Hunter is getting just over 35.5. Max Crosby is getting 35.5. Parsons is getting $24 million a year on his fifth-year option. He is younger than all of those edge rushers that I just named, and this is his first big payday. He is going to want to be the highest-paid edge rusher in the league, and deservedly so. And you're looking at a guy that if he hits the open market, he's going to reach at least $45 million a year in average annual value. The Bucs currently have just under $30 million in cap space for 2026. Now, I always trust Jason and Greeny to figure out how to shuffle money around, how to get the contracts to work, how to get the deals to work, how to stay under the salary cap, all of that. But this is asking a lot. Baker is going to need a new deal. Mike Evans is in a contract year. Vita Vea will be in a contract year next year. You have to re-sign McCullum. Levante is going to be a free agent. Reddick is on a one-year deal. But then again, if you're bringing in Parsons, you're probably not bringing back Hassan Reddick. Gedeke is going to need a new deal. Rashad is a free agent. Greg Gaines, Logan Hall, Deion Jones, Anthony Walker, Cade Otton, Kayvon Merriweather. The Bucs have 41 players that are going to be free agents after this season. And again, you have less than $30 million to play with. So if you trade for Parsons, you're probably talking multiple players and multiple draft picks. You're talking at least 2 high draft picks. And given where the Bucs are and where they're expected to finish the year, that would be in the postseason, you're probably talking 2 1s because they're going to be drafting late. Might be a 1 and a 2, plus you're probably going to have to give up a top young player like Yaya Diaby or Bucky Irving. Do not yell at me. The Cowboys don't have a run game, and they aren't going to trade for Rachaad White when he's in a contract year. They can just sign him in March when he's a free agent, but they are going to want a significant return of young talent in the combination of draft picks and a young player that they can use right now that has star potential. And the 2 biggest ones that come to mind are Yaya Diaby because of the position that he plays, and Bucky Irving because he took the league by storm. Are you willing to give up a first and a second next year and Yaya Diaby at the very least to land Micah Parsons? Are you willing to give up your first round pick in 2026 and your first round pick in 2027 in addition to Yaya Diaby to get Parsons? Maybe you are, but you're also, are you also willing to deal with the salary fallout from that trade? That could very well mean that there isn't money for Evans, or there isn't money for a Baker extension or a Vita extension, or they can't get something worked out with Cansey and he walks. There is a legitimate ripple effect here that would cost the Bucs far more than what they would just be giving up in the actual trade. That money will now have to be allocated to Parsons instead of other players. And sure, Evans probably wants to end his career in Tampa, probably would be willing to sign for less than what he's worth on the open market. But would Baker? We know that Baker loves it in Tampa. He's talked about it multiple times, mentioned it on New Heights, mentioned it on NFL Network, that when he landed in Tampa, he felt at home. But what if things don't work out with Trevor Lawrence and the Jags come calling after the 2026 season because Cohen wants to save his job and reunite with the quarterback that got him the job in the first place? What if the Bears realize that Caleb Williams is trash and they throw a bunch of money at Baker, or the Giants or the Steelers? He would have plenty of options. Are you willing to take that risk for an edge rusher that's going to cost you $45 million a year? Because you can't pay your quarterback and an edge rusher $100 million a year. More than half of the Bucs salary cap, if you land Parsons, is going to be eaten up by about 5 players, maybe even more than half. That's not a recipe for long-term success. We all love to think about what Parsons could do in a Todd Bowles defense and what he would be able to do to elevate this team. But the reality is that it just isn't very realistic. Now, if Jason pulls off some magic and he gets it done, we're going to be going live on YouTube immediately, and I'll eat my crow and I'll celebrate with the rest of you. But at the end of the day, I don't think Parsons gets traded. I really, really don't. And if he holds out all year, that's going to hurt his chances to be the highest paid edge rusher in league history, to be the highest paid non-quarterback in league history once free agency begins. It didn't work out well for Le'Veon Bell. It's not going to work out with Parsons. It hasn't worked out with anybody. Sitting out a year over a contract dispute never works in the player's favor. So I fully expect him to play for Dallas this year and then be the most coveted free agent when March rolls around. That's going to do it for this episode. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Follow on other social medias, Instagram, TikTok at Locked On Bucs. You can follow the Locked On Bucs Facebook page. Make sure that you are following along on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed there, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Turn on those notifications so you know every time a new episode drops. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. If you want to support the show but you don't want to be an insider, it's real simple. Like this episode on YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. Those things do help other Buccaneers fans find the show. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.